How's it going, everybody? This is Rob, and today I'm going to try, emphasis on try, to make a short video comparing the RGB output of a couple of different NES machines. The first one, the one you're actually looking at now, is an NES, a front-loading NTSC toaster-style NES, with an NES RGB mod chip created by Tim Worthington. And basically what that does is it allows you to use the original hardware, the original picture processing unit, or the PPU, in conjunction with the NES RGB mod chip to allow it to output RGB when normally it wouldn't. And I'm comparing that to an Analogue Nt Mini, which isn't technically a true NES. It is an FPGA NES, meaning that it simulates in hardware the Nintendo Entertainment System guts. So because it's hardware, it's actually very, very, very close. And you'll see that even the software, the glitches that, you know, from playing certain games will show up in the same exact way, because it really is like playing on an NES. So the only difference is that because it's an FPGA, it has a lot of capabilities way beyond an NES, including different kinds of video output, whereas you have to modify an original NES to do anything really other than RF or just composite video. For the NES, for the Analogue Nt Mini, you can output HDMI, RGB, composite, right, S-video, even component. So, but we're focusing today solely on the RGB. Everything's connected, even the third machine, which is just as I'm using it as a baseline, just a regular old NES connected via the RCA cable, right, the yellow cable, the one that ubiquitous would probably most people use. Well, actually, probably most people use RF, which is worse, but. Anyway, just a standard NES with the yellow cable hooked in. Everything's hooked in. All three machines are hooked into this Sony BVM. Again, what you're looking at right now is the NES RGB modded NES. That's a lot of NES, I'm saying, but that's the name of the damn board. It's an NES RGB board. Anyway, this one is well, I should probably mention that there's a few different color palettes you can choose from when you install the NES RGB. You can hardwire it to output any particular color palette that you like, but most people install a switch. This particular NES with the modification I actually bought from somebody who had installed it. I think he installed it himself. I'm not sure if he had it installed, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It was hardwired to only output the natural color palette, and that natural color palette is meant to emulate the color palette of just a regular Nintendo, the one that we're going to be using as a baseline. And color palettes, they can vary wildly. There's three on this NES RGB. There's that you can choose from. There's the natural, there's one called improved, which is very close to natural, and then there's one called Garish, which is quite a bit different than the other two. The Garish color palette actually comes from a PlayChoice 10 machine color palette. The PlayChoice 10, if you're not familiar with that, it was an arcade version of an NES that was basically an NES on a timer, and you can go into an arcade, put a quarter, and get 5 minutes of basically playing an NES game. But because it was the NES guts in this PlayChoice 10 machine at the arcades, the arcade version, the PlayChoice 10 NES hardware, had the capability of outputting RGB. However, the RGB that it outputted used a completely different color palette, so the games didn't look quite the same. Graphically they did. The fidelity of the games looked the same. It wasn't like it had extra resolution or anything like that. But because it used a different PPU, it just had a different color palette. When the Super Mario Brothers game calls for yellow, the home NES will choose a yellow that's very different than the PlayChoice 10 displays yellow. And I'm going to show, actually I can show you that here. I've actually installed the switch on this. It was hardwired for natural, but now I can choose between hardwired Garish, which is the PlayChoice 10 color palette, or just turn everything off and allow it to output normal AB, which I chose to do instead of having, if I hadn't have done that, I would have been able to choose between improved, natural, and Garish, but improved and natural are so close that I figured it was a better option to I can only choose three because I have a three-way switch. It was a better option for me to choose between natural and Garish because they're very different, and then the middle option, which is turn RGB off, so you can use the NES as a regular NES and output normal AV, which is helpful for me if I want to stream, because I can't stream via RGB SCART. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Let me go over there Let me reach behind this NES, and there's a physical switch behind it. You'll probably hear it click. And I'm going to switch between the natural color palette and the Garish, aka the Play Choice 10 color palette. So here we go. This is natural, and that's Garish. So as you can tell, there's a huge difference in the color palette, especially in the background. I mean, it went from like a beige or a tan to just straight up yellow. And if you look at the colors of Luigi and Mario, I mean, the red is really, really red. It's not like a dark red or maroon. It's super red, and the green is like a bright green. Some people enjoy this color. If you played a lot of Play Choice 10 games in the arcades, then you probably are used to this color. But most folks didn't. Most folks played on their home console, home NES, which had a different color palette. So let me quickly show you that by going back. And that's a natural color palette. So I want to show you the Mario. So look at Mario. It's kind of dark red. And look at that. It's a bright red for Mario there. You have bright red with a dark red. Some people just like that. You know, it's all personal preference. There's no real way to play, but that's the default. And then let me switch over to Analogue Nt because it also has color palettes. So just you know, comparing the RGB quality is pretty close. This is the Analogue Nt, and I'm not sure which color palette I left it in because I was messing with the color palettes. Let's see, color palette. So some be aware. FirebrandX is what it defaults to, and these are all just names of different palettes. You can see there's slight changes. The black and white palettes, obviously black and white. The Play Choice 10 is equivalent to the Garish on the NESRGB board, or the it's basically, you'll see here, it's almost the same thing. But to get it close to the one, I think Beware is the closest to the original. Let me go back. See if it's still on the same screen. Yeah, it's pretty close. So this is the NES with the NESRGB, and I'm just looking at the color palette, and that's the NT Mini. So normally you want to do, or you'll do this. You'll do FirebrandX. So that's I think most folks will. If you don't mess with your color palette, that's what you get, and they're pretty dang close. It kind of varies in the blue. If you look at the blue Super Mario Brothers, that's the this is again the NESRGB, and that's the NT Mini. You can tell a little bit more if we go into the game, but you know, it's totally different if we go to the, well, not totally. The colors are kind of the same, but you can see like it's a lot fuzzier. This is the regular AV connection on a toaster NES. Even though my NESRGB modded NES is capable of just outputting AV because I put that switch in there, I'm not using it because in order to go to the other style of output, in order to go from the RGB to regular AV out, you actually have to reset it. So I don't want to sit there and reset it every time, so I just hooked up another NES that I had lying around. So again, this is analog, not analog, well, they're all analog. This is the AV out, just the regular RCA composite out. And that is, I'm not sure what I left on. They're so close. Which one is this one? That one is the NT Mini. And that is the NESRGB modded NES. NT Mini. Okay, I'm going to go spend a couple. The problem is they're not, I want them all in the same kind of background. You know what we can do? Let's put them all on the same screen. So let's start the game. We can just leave it here for now. So that is the NESRGB modded NES. And let's get the NT Mini in the same place. Okay. And then let's switch to, oops, hit the wrong button. Blank. There we go. And let's get to the same place with the standard NES. So the biggest thing to note here is the RGB is actually excellent between the NT Mini and the NESRGB NES. They're both excellent. They're very crisp, very clear. Color palettes are personal preference. The nice thing about the NT Mini is that you can actually add a whole bunch of different colors. I guess an infinite number, however many you can fit on the size of your card, because you can actually load some from SD cards. You can download color palettes. and just put them on the SD card, and you can just select whatever you want. So it's pretty cool. The one for the NESRGB limits you to 3. Again, you can hardwire it if you always want it to be one way, or you can have a switch like I do. So let's compare again. This is that's the analog, or I keep saying analog, but this is standard AV, RCA out. That's RGB, and or the NT Mini. I mean, it's still RGB, but it's NT Mini, and then that's the NESRGB. So I don't know. I think between the two, it's really, really close. I think that you can't go wrong with either one. They both look fantastic. So I'm gonna kill this Goomba here. You'll see a little bit more with the color palettes. I'm gonna kill this guy. The sky. So this kind of looks pretty blue. I go to the NT Mini. I think it looks a little bit more gray. Let's go here, and I'll switch between the two. But that looks a little bit more gray to me. All right, Goomba, dead. And we go to the standard RCA out, so you can pause it out. And that looks like it has a green tinge to me. But you know, more than that, again, that's all color palette. The color palette's personal preference, and you can alter that. Well, you can alter it to a certain extent on the. I think you actually can update the NESRGB board with new color palettes, but it's not super straightforward. You got to order some kind of hardware connector and, like, I guess flash it or something like that. I didn't really look into it because I'm perfectly fine with the natural color palette that it uses. Anyway, so let's go through the different. So that's again natural, or not natural. That's the normal NES, and then that's the NT Mini, and then that's the NESRGB. I think I dig this one the best right here as far as color palette. But as far as clarity and sharpness and, you know, brightness and all that stuff, both of them are absolutely gorgeous. They look absolutely gorgeous. Definitely, if you have an RGB capable monitor, you need to get an RGB modded NES because it makes a big difference. If I played, I don't have it in there right now, but like Kid Dracula made a huge difference in the way that looked. It's a Famicom only import game, but it looks pretty good. So yeah, I think that, grab the right controller. I think that they all look pretty great. So, and you'll see like the graphical glitch. See the graphical glitch underneath World 1? I just want to show you between, that's again, so this one and this one, these are both NES hardware, like straight up NES hardware. Of course, the output for this has been modified for RGB, but it's still NES hardware. This one is the hardware simulation, but you'll see it does the exact same thing. Exact same thing. So that's how close the hardware simulation is. So this is playing the NT Mini. And so let me show you so you can actually, here's the custom one, but you can actually load different palettes. But anyway, I think I like the wear for this one. And that's the nice thing about the NT Minis. You can just switch, like, you know, you're not limited to the 3. Oh, well, I guess I don't get a mushroom. I probably missed my mushroom from before. Yeah, you can see the graphical glitches on the right. That's it. You can actually, on a lot of TVs, that won't even show up. You see the glitches on the right because it's considered overscan. That's part of the screen that shouldn't be displayed. So, if you're playing on HDMI, you can actually go into the NT Mini and crop it. So if you want to crop out the garbage at the end of the screen, you can do that. It does not work in RGB, at least I don't think it does. I could try. Getting off topic, but well, there goes my short video, right? Probably not that long, what, 15 minutes? Where's the... There's a way to... Oh, video. Oops. I don't think cropping works. No, it doesn't. It would normally bring in the... Oh, I died. Time. It normally brings in the left side of the you know, it cuts off the video image when you crop it, but it doesn't do shit in analog mode. So anyway, that is the difference. I'll give you one final look. They're probably all at this level point right now because they probably all died because of time. Yep. So let's start with the NESRGB one last time, one last look. NESRGB, NT Mini, regular NES. I think we can at least agree that the regular NES looks by far much worse. And one final comparison, just for the color palettes of the Play Choice 10, we'll go with Garish. There's the Garish color palette. Actually, let's look at it. See, I think it looks kind of cool. It looks really cool, actually. There's the Garish, and then the equivalent, which is the, oops, Play Choice 10. Oops. No, don't exit. Play Choice 10. And go there. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good. So nice thing is you can always change between the games and then compare it to, back to here. Oh man, so fuzzy, so fuzzy. Yeah, it's a huge improvement. Much darker too. Anyway guys, that's the comparison of the RGB capabilities using Super Mario Bros. 3. I could go through a whole bunch of other games, but the results are pretty similar. The palettes are, again, personal preference. The sharpness is really good. It just looks way better in RGB, no matter if you're using the NT Mini or if you're using an NES modified with the NES RGB kit. They both look fantastic, so you can't really go wrong. Now, I will say that if you want to do the NES, if you want to stick with the original hardware and get the NES with the NES RGB kit, you got to look at least, boy, on the super low end, maybe 250, but you're gonna go over three, more than likely, over 300 bucks, because the kit itself is like $100, I think, and boy, to have it installed too, because you have to desolder the original PPU, like completely remove it from the board and have to pain in the ass, put it in another board, put it in a piggyback style. It's quite involved. So I think you're probably paying, honestly, probably around 350, 300 to 350, probably 350. And the Analogue Nt Mini is 450, but it does come with a wireless controller, which is worth about 50 bucks. So you're looking at about a $50 difference if you decide to get that wireless controller for your NES. You may not. So anywhere from $50 to $100 difference. And there's the NT Mini does a lot more than just play NES games, especially with jailbroken software. So anyway, guys, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, give me a like, subscribe if you'd like to. I put out videos pretty regularly. It's just nice to know people are watching. But yeah, so you can either send me a comment there, or you can look me up on Twitter at Rob Nava, or you can even look me up on Facebook. It's the same name. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.